At the 48th Phyllis Schlafly Eagle Council, we sat down with Kris Kobach, the former Secretary of State for Kansas. He's currently running for U.S. Senate for Kansas and is also a key player in We Build the Wall. Kris Kobach, wonderful to have you in American Thought Leaders.
Great to be with you.
So you're eyeing a Senate run here. Tell me more. What inspired you to do this?
Well, we actually did more than eye it. We jumped in the race in July. And it's an open seat. It's one of only 4, I believe, open seats in the entire U.S. Senate in the 2020 cycle. It's something I decided I needed to do because there's just so much happening on the issues I care about. Viewers may know that I have spent the better part of the last 2 decades of my career on immigration.
Right.
Advising President Trump on illegal immigration, representing ICE agents in court, co-authoring the Arizona law. Right now, there's so many important decisions that are going to be made in the U.S. Senate, and there really isn't anyone carrying the flag for the pro-enforcement point of view, which usually coincides with the president's point of view.
Okay.
And there needs to be that presence in the Senate, and it's not there right now, and so I think I can fill that void. The other big thing is, of course, the Constitution. I used to teach constitutional law for 15 years.
Okay.
And President Trump has had a great run and a great set of nominees for the bench. But even Republican presidents will sometimes make a mistake. Their advisors will say this is the right person for that judicial slot, and it'll turn out that the person that, isn't really as conservative or originalist in doctrine as the staff thought. And it helps to have in the Senate people with a deep constitutional knowledge who can actually ask the right questions and not just ask a question that a staffer handed to you. And then when the nominee gives an answer that's flawed in many ways, the senator just moves on to the next question because he doesn't know why it's flawed. So I think we need to have constitutional conservatives in the Senate right now because the courts have been moved in a great direction with President Trump. I want to make sure it continues happening, hopefully in a second Trump term.
It's very, very interesting. So immigration, of course, is the central issue for you. What other issues are key?
A number of issues. I'm pro-life, and that ties into the courts, of course.
Yes.
I'm a lifelong gun enthusiast and Second Amendment guy. I'm very much worried right now about the upcoming debate in the Senate where it appears that Mitch McConnell, more than appears, Mitch McConnell has stated publicly that what we can't do is fail to do something, meaning pass some sort of gun control law in response to the Dayton and El Paso shootings.
Right.
And I think that the laws that they're currently talking about, which are mainly universal background checks and red flag laws based on the very flawed red flag laws that have been passed by blue states, both of those steps would be very, very bad, would not do anything to stop mass shootings, but would seriously restrict the firearms rights of law-abiding Americans. So that issue has me very alert right now as to problems that might happen in the U.S. Senate.
And what kind of legislation would you recommend to respond to this, obviously?
I come down to the fact that the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And you look at so many shootings, whether it's these high-profile mass shootings or smaller ones, where actually a good Samaritan, a law-abiding American steps in and saves somebody, it's because the good guy with a gun was there. So one thing I think we should have is a federal law mandating reciprocity for your concealed carry permit. If you've got a concealed carry permit in Texas, you should be able to take it to all the other states should be made to any state. You should be able to take it to any state you want, and they should be required to respect it, even if that state is California or New York, which, by the way, are have a lot of violence, in large part because of Democrat leadership and the kind of policies that they've put in place over the past few decades. So that's one thing I'd like to see that would be very helpful. There are other smaller pieces that I'd like to see. I think the way the federal government regulates suppressors has got to change. But there's a lot to be done in the U.S. Senate and to move it in a more conservative direction, and it's not happening right now.
Just on the gun control, gun issue side, a lot of people that live in the bigger cities, like think New York, Chicago, Baltimore, these types of places, of course these cities do have gun laws. It's very hard to imagine for people that live there suddenly open gun availability for anybody. How do you envision it working for these cities, or is it just the same way?
The same way it works for the rest of the country. You know, come to Kansas. Guns are widely available. It's part of our culture. It's many. I'd say the majority of states. It's perfectly normal for people to protect themselves and their family by having a firearm in the home, by having a firearm in the car, or just having that extra level of protection. Because, of course, we all recognize and realize that the police are the principal government entity that protects us against violence, but very rarely are you within 1 minute of a police officer, or there are so many instances in our daily lives where the government isn't there to protect you, and it's part of the whole American ethos. Thomas Jefferson wrote about this. He said that he urged Americans in some of his later writings to always be armed, to protect themselves. That was kind of how the American identity, that's one of the aspects of the American identity, along with rule of law and constitutionalism. But the notion that an armed citizenry is a well-protected citizenry, both from foreign invasion and from internal conflict and crime, that goes all the way back to before Jefferson.
Right, and because of this obvious deterrent.
And one of the best statistical ways of looking at this is to look at the spread of concealed carry laws. Now almost all of the states have concealed carry laws allowing you to conceal carry, and in virtually every state, as more law-abiding citizens started concealed carrying and started possessing firearms for their own defense, crime went down. Violent crimes have gone down astonishingly in state after state after concealed carry happens, and it's because criminals are rational. A criminal is a rational decision maker in most cases, and the criminal makes a decision.
Are you going to take a chance?
Am I going to take a chance that this person I'm thinking about mugging has a gun? And if the criminal is aware that people are allowed to conceal carry in the state, the criminal might think, that woman has a purse and she might have a gun in that purse. I'm not going to do what I otherwise would do. That's what goes on in his mind. And that's borne out in the statistics. Violent crime, rape, they all go down where more law-abiding citizens are able to carry.
Very, very interesting. Let's jump to the immigration side, or more specifically, your involvement. You're one of the key players in the citizenry-built wall. We build the wall. Tell me a little bit about how did you get? Did you come up with the idea? Were we working closely with the other folks there?
I didn't come up with it. The founder of We Build the Wall is Brian Kolfage, who's a Air Force veteran, triple amputee, a true hero. He, in December of 2018, was frustrated with the government shutdown over the wall funding, and he started a GoFundMe page to raise money to help fund the federal government's wall, build Trump's wall.
I see. So that was okay. That was the solo effort, and then people just kind of joined in.
And he raised $20 million in 20 days, basically, and extraordinary, fastest, biggest GoFundMe to date at that point. And then he realized at some point that you can't actually give a large check to the federal government and say, spend it on this. You can't compel them to spend it. They can take that check and spend it on whatever they want to spend it on. And so that's when he started getting advisors from around the country, and I was one of the people who was tapped to come in and help. A new organization is going to be created. It's going to be a nonprofit, and it's going to build a privately funded wall on private land. We're going to, all of the contributors of that 20 million were sent an email saying they had to opt in. Would you like your contribution to be used to build a private wall on the border? And thankfully, the overwhelming majority opted in, and then we've raised money since then. And so we completed our first privately built wall in American history near El Paso, just
Our
west.
reporters were there.
Yes,
exactly. Yes,
just west of El Paso, and we're soon to be embarking on project number 2. And we have project number 3 already drawn up as well. So it's exciting and what we're doing is we don't have the resources that the federal government has, so we aren't building a 50-mile stretch out in the middle of the desert. What we're doing is we're building strategic 1 mile, 2 mile, half a mile, places where the terrain is maybe too gnarly for the federal government and they've left it unbuilt for that reason, which is our project 1. The Army Corps of Engineers thought you couldn't build there because the terrain was too steep. Well, we proved them wrong. And we're looking for other places where the federal government has left a gap, and we can go in, stand in the gap, and build the wall.
And so is the idea that these will connect ultimately somehow with
Yeah.
these
And
federal...
ultimately, every wall that we build the wall constructs, it is designed to integrate, hopefully seamlessly, with the existing structures or future structures that the Border Patrol may build. And so we are working closely with Border Patrol officials to make sure that that happens, that when we build something, we hand the keys to them and say, all right, here's your wall. When we contemplate building something else, we talk to them and say, hey, here's how we're thinking of building it. Would you like it that way or would you like it this way?
Interesting.
And so, yeah, we're trying to, it's a citizenry-led effort to add to what Congress only offered enough money for a relatively small amount of walls, about 55 miles.
Okay.
And then the president, through his national emergency declaration, has transferred DOD money to build another 218 miles. But that's compared to the total more than 1,800 miles that still need to be built. It's fairly small. So that's where We Build the Wall can step in and supplement the efforts of the federal government. Ordinary citizens, the average...
As the funds come in.
Yeah, the funds have been coming in, and as long as people keep contributing, we'll keep building. So the average contribution size is $67. But if hundreds of thousands of people give $67, you can raise $25 million, which is approximately where we're at right now.
Very interesting. And does it need to be a wall from sea to sea kind of thing? A lot of people have this question.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it needs to be pretty close to that. We are often told by liberals and open borders advocates in Congress, we can't build there. There are natural features, terrain features that prohibit you from building, and it makes it hard to cross. Well, that's actually what they said about the section of the area where we just built the wall.
Right.
Because it has a steep hill to it, the argument was made by many people that, the smuggling won't happen there. They'd have to climb a little bit. And it turns out that's exactly where the smuggling was happening, because the hills concealed the paths of the smugglers. And so too often bureaucrats in Washington say, we don't need to build a wall there. It's hilly terrain. There's some canyons. Don't worry about it. Well, actually, that's often exactly where the smugglers go, because the hills and the canyons conceal them from the aerostats, which are the blimp things that have, and other aerial surveillance. So we do need to, while it may not be every inch of the border, there are many places on the border that bureaucrats have said, we don't need to build there, like where We Build the Wall just built, when in fact we must build there, because that's where the drug smuggling is occurring. And there was tons. One Border Patrol agent estimated over $100,000 worth of drugs every night were coming in through that gap. And
incredible.
It's not happening anymore because we built the wall.
And this was just this one little section.
Yeah, half a mile.
But it's not just, they can't, of course they can go around, but it just makes it more difficult.
Well, in that particular case, the half mile we built near El Paso, it links up to the existing city, the wall that existed in the city.
I see.
And it just came to an end. But before we built, it just ended in a parking lot. And so all you did, if you were a Mexican smuggler, is you would just walk around the end of the wall, and then there was this flat parking lot, and then the hill would occur. So they'd smuggle humans in the flat parking lot and smuggle drugs along the hill. And so we started where the existing barrier ended, and then we continued 310 vertical feet up the side of the mountain. And in so doing, we stopped both the human smuggling and the drug smuggling up on the hill. So in that case, it's very difficult to go higher than we went about as high as you could go. So yeah, our objective is to make a difference, not just build a chunk of wall somewhere that you can easily go around. Is to make a difference in the way the smugglers have to operate. Now they no longer have a gap that used to be one of the biggest smuggling gaps in the entire border. The reason was that it's so close to a metropolitan area. When you have the El Paso Juarez joint metropolitan area is one of the largest on any international border in the world, certainly in the Western Hemisphere.
Okay.
And so you had all of this population right next to a gaping hole in the wall, and so that's why that gap had to be plugged.
Oh, fascinating. One more question, Kris. If you were able to lead particular immigration legislation right now, something that's very urgent and important, what is it that you would?
At the top of my list would be changes to our asylum laws so that you can't walk through multiple safe countries and then suddenly get to the United States and say, "Oh, I'm here to claim asylum." That would be what plug the loopholes in the asylum system. The other one that's even bigger in terms of its total impact would be mandate E-Verify for all employers nationwide, so that every employer has to check this. It's an internet-based system. It's really easy to use. Hundreds of thousands of employers already use it. It's mandatory in Arizona, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and a couple other states I'm forgetting. Make that nationwide. That would make it much harder for illegal labor to take away American jobs.
Okay. Kris Kobach, wonderful to have you.
Great talking to you.